In this lesson, we'll create an external finishing toolpath. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create a profile finish toolpath and use rest machining on a profile toolpath. In Fusion 360, we want to carry on with our turning cam setup. At this point, we've created a facing toolpath as well as a profile roughing toolpath. Now we want to make sure that we remove all the material we can with the profile finishing toolpath. Now, based on the tools that we have and the geometry, we're not going to be able to completely finish this part with the profile toolpath, but we will get it extremely close. So we want to make sure that we understand all of our options. So we're going to come into our turning dropdown and we're going to take a look at turning profile finishing. We're going to change our tool to something that's more applicable for finishing. And inside of this design, we already have tool number 10, which is a VNMG332. We're going to select this tool. And if we take a look at the preview, you can see the geometry and the insert is different than the one we used to rough the part. Now, notice again that we're using outside profiling in all of the default settings for our tool. And in the geometry section, again, we're going from model front to model back, but we do want to add a small amount on the back side to make sure that we extend past. Now remember, we used the offset of minus 0.15 when we were roughing this. So I'm going to do minus 0.1 in this instance, which will allow me to go past the back of the part, but not all the way to where we stopped at when we were roughing. The next thing that we want to do is take a look at the radii settings. Once again, we're going to be taking a look at the inside by selecting the inside diameter and make sure that we exclude that area so that the tool is not trying to go in. The next thing that we want to do is take a look at the passes. Right now, stock to leave is off because this is a finishing toolpath. But notice that we only have one step over and it has a specific step over value. I'm going to increase this to 2 step overs. Spring pass, which will repeat the final pass if we need to, and that no dragging option again. So I'm going to turn on no dragging, and I'm going to leave all the rest of the settings as default and say OK, and just take a look at what we have. So notice because we're extending past the part, that it's actually coming past and it's dropping in and digging into the back of the part. While this might be okay, it's probably not ideal when we're trying to come in and part this. So I'm going to make some adjustments to the toolpath by right-clicking and editing. And the first thing I want to do is go to Geometry and turn on Rest Machining. I'm going to turn on Rest Machining from the previous operation so it knows exactly what material has already been removed. I also want to make sure that the back mode, which is using that 0.1 offset, is actually making sure that we are extending far enough past the part, but we're not going too far. That 0.1 is going to be fine. So from here, we're going to move on to our clearances. Everything looks fine with our clearance values. And then we go into our passes. Now from our passes, again, we're using that no dragging. That's still the same. Make sharp corners is still the same. Number of step overs, everything here is fine. Notice in the top section, we have front to back for our direction and grooving. We can not allow grooving. We can allow radial, axial, or radial and axial grooving. If I select don't allow grooving and I finish this toolpath, notice that it doesn't allow the tool to drop into the groove or to drop off of the back section. Now, while we might want to remove some of the material from the groove, we don't have direct control over not allowing it to do both the back and the middle section. So what we need to do is we need to minimize the amount that we're going past the back just far enough for us to come back in and use something like a parting tool. So I'm going to make one more adjustment to this toolpath. I'm going to go back to my geometry section, and instead of going all the way back 0.1, I'm going to say 0.05 for the offset on the backside. I'm going to say OK. Now we're allowing the tool to go back a little bit less off the back of the part, leaving more stock here. Now again, it's probably not ideal. There are more adjustments that we can make if we determine that we don't want it to go past at all. It is automatically going to take the center of the tool to that back edge. So if we change the model back to 0, so no offset, it's only going to take it back just a little bit based on the stock that was left behind. So again, there are a couple different options that we can play with depending what our end result is and how we want to move to our next operations. From here, I'm going to go back to a home view and just review the toolpaths that we've created. We've faced the front of the part, then we've done a roughing operation, and then we've come back in with a different tool. We've cleaned up the front chamfer, we've gone down into the groove to take a lot of the material away, and we've done a small amount of cleanup right on that back edge, leaving enough for us to come back in with a parting tool and remove this from the rest of the stock. At this point, let's make sure that we do save this before we move on to the next step.